Pen tool also has the functionality of adding and removing the anchor points. Under the pen tool, we have add and remove anchor point tools. But we don't have to use them from here because the pen tool can easily perform these tasks for us. To add an anchor point, just move the pen tool over the path. Notice how the pen tool icon now has a plus sign. It means that the pen tool is now going to act like the add anchor point tool. Let's click to add an anchor point. To remove an anchor point, just hover over an anchor point to invoke the delete anchor point tool and use left click to remove it. If you don't want the pen tool to behave this way, you can simply go to the preferences and turn on the disable auto add delete checkbox. Now we can no longer add or remove the anchor points through the pen tool. There are a couple of other ways that can be used to remove the anchor points. Let's grab few anchor points first. Now under the properties panel, we have some buttons that perform different path operations. And this is the one that removes the selected anchor points. Inside the object menu, we have remove anchor points option under the path submenu that does the same job. So adding and deleting the anchor points was so simple. Now let's consider a case where we want to add an anchor point right in the middle of a segment. Well, that would be tricky if we had to do it manually, but Illustrator has an option that can handle it for us. Let's take a look at how we do it. First we need to select the object. Then just navigate through the object menu, path, and click on add anchor points. Now each segment of the selected object has an anchor point right in the middle. This is a very handy option for certain cases, but this method too has its limitations. Like if a segment is asymmetrical, we don't get the anchor point exactly at the midpoint of a segment. And this option adds anchor points to the whole object. It is not currently possible to add anchor points only to the selected parts of an object. The first tip is about moving an active anchor point while drawing. Let's consider a case where we have clicked on a wrong point and want to move the anchor point without letting go of the mouse button. In this case, we can just hold down the spacebar and then move the anchor point to where we want it to be. The second tip is about working asymmetrically with handles. We already know when we click and drag, we get two handles that move symmetrically. Dragging in and out changes the length, and moving the cursor around the anchor point changes the direction of the handles. We can use the Control key to freeze or lock the length of the handle on the other side. And holding down the Alt key is gonna freeze it all together. The third tip is also about the handles. As we know, click and drag always gets us two handles. Well, it doesn't have to be two handles every time. If we click on a point and then hold down the Alt key while dragging, we get only one handle. I use this tip a lot whenever I draw something with the pen tool. And I think it is a great tip that one could use while drawing with the pen tool. This tip is about preserving the shape of the segments while deleting the anchor points. Here we have a shape, and as soon as I remove an anchor point, the segment loses its shape. To avoid this problem, use shift click while deleting the anchor points. Now notice that the segment is pretty much the same as it was with the anchor point. Rubber band is a good feature, but not everyone likes to work with it. So for those who don't like to work with the rubber band, just press Ctrl K to open up the preferences, and under the selection and anchor display, look up for this option. Now we have two tools here. We already know about the pen tool, and the curvature tool is another tool that uses the rubber band feature. I want to turn off the rubber band for the pen tool. So let's uncheck the pen tool checkbox and click OK to save the preferences. Now if we try to draw anything, the rubber band won't show up. Sometimes when we close a path, we face a problem like this. This happens when the first anchor point of the drawing is of smooth type. To avoid this problem, just hold down the Alt key while closing the object. So that's all about the tips. Now let's take a look into different pen tool cursors. The first cursor has an asterisk next to it. It indicates that the pen tool is not attached to any object and ready to draw a new object. These two are for adding and deleting the anchor points. This one with a sharp corner point indicates that clicking on an anchor point will eliminate an unused handle. This one appears when we hover over an end point or start point of an existing path, and it indicates that clicking on an open point is going to resume the drawing. This one shows up when we hover over the first anchor point of the active drawing. It indicates that clicking on the anchor point is going to create a closed area or object. Alright, now that we know enough about the pen tool, for practice and assignments, I have prepared a few simple drawings for you. Now one right here has some labels that are going to guide you about where to click and drag, press a certain key or use a certain tool. In order to be able to complete these drawings, you should know about the meaning of each label. So let's understand what these labels mean. S indicates the starting point of a drawing. The red point with no labels on the handles is for click and drag. The blue point with a spike on one of its handles implies the use of the Alt button. Once you reach the control point, just hold down the Alt key for the anchor point tool and move it to the direction it is pointing to. If the movement of the handles is unidirectional, we can also use the control key instead of the Alt key. But the Alt key is doing a good job here, so I'm not gonna introduce any other key for that reason. Next we have the purple point which has a dotted grey handle. It means that the grey handle has to be eliminated before you go to the next point. The green points are for the clicks. Just click on them and move to the next one. So all you have to do now is to follow these instructions and draw these images until you feel confident enough to draw these ones by yourself. And if you want me to add more exercises like these, please let me know. Our next reshaping tool is the Direct Selection tool. It is one of the extensively used tools in the Illustrator. Now you might have already known that we use this tool to move the anchor points and the handles around, but it can also be used to reshape the curved segments. There is one more thing that many people don't know about this tool. If we select a segment and press the arrow keys, we can easily reshape the segment by moving its handles around. This is a small but very useful tip that we could use while working. The Curvature Tool is another great tool to work with, but it takes some getting used to, cause it works quite differently from the pen tool. Let's understand how to use it. Press Shift plus tilde key to activate the Curvature Tool. As the name suggests, what this tool does best is creating the curved segments. We do not have to click and drag to create a curved segment like we do with the pen tool. Curvature Tool automatically creates the curved segments as we draw. We can use double click or alt click on an anchor point to convert it to a corner type and back to smooth. Or we can just use the alt click while drawing to create a linear anchor point. A smooth anchor point is hollow, while a linear anchor point has a dot inside it. Through this one difference, we can tell them apart. Curvature Tool also has the ability to move and add the anchor points. So once we finish the drawing, we can select the anchor points and move them around. Or we can add the new anchor points by clicking anywhere on the path. To remove an anchor point, just select it and press delete or backspace. Normally, using the delete or backspace key also deletes the segments along with the anchor point. But we do not have to worry about it when the Curvature Tool is active. The Curvature Tool has an interesting feature that most people aren't aware of, which is merging the objects together. Though it is quite tricky to understand how merging works and what's going on, we are going to be talking about merging in detail. So here we have two boxes, and if we select one box, we will notice that out of 4 anchor points, one anchor point is already selected by default. This is the last anchor point of the shape, the 4th one. Now always keep that in mind that the first and the last anchor point of an object are the only points that we need in the merging process. To make it easier for you to understand, I have written a JavaScript that displays the index of the anchor points of the selected objects. Let's run the script. Now as you can see that this one is the first and this one is the last anchor point of this shape. So only this segment is going to be used for the merging process. I have already mirrored the same box, so we have all the anchor points facing the right way. Alright, let's merge them. Select any of these boxes and activate the Curvature Tool. Since we already have the fourth anchor point selected by default here, it is always going to be included in the merging process. We don't have to click on it to involve it. Just select the object and we are good to go. Okay, now all we have to do is to click either first or the last anchor point of this box. I'm gonna click on the matching point to get the best result. Alright, let's click. And here we have it. Now notice that the right box did not lose its shape, while the box on the left is no longer linear and its stroke color is also changed. If we click on the first anchor point instead of the fourth one, we get a twisted result like this. So if you ever get something like this, it is just due to the mismatching of the points. In such cases, just undo and try a different point to get a better outcome. Under the pen tool, we have one more amazing tool, which is the anchor point tool. It basically is a reshaping tool with the ability to manipulate the different elements of a segment. In the previous versions, it was convert anchor point tool, but now it can do a lot more than just converting the anchor points. And in this video, learning about all the amazing things we can do with the help of this wonderful tool. Let's start with converting an anchor point. So here we have an object with 3 sharp points. And let's say we want to convert this anchor point into a smooth one. Just click and drag it with the anchor point tool to make it a smooth point. Now click on it once and it's going to be converted back to the sharp point. So click and drag for the smooth point and a click for the sharp point. And by the way, we can also drop the handles with the help of the anchor point tool. Just click on a handle and it will be vanished. These 2 buttons right here can also perform the conversion. So if you just want to convert the anchor points, you can just use these buttons. Anchor point tool also allows us to move each handle independently, and we already know that from the pen tool videos. But besides anchors and handles, we can directly work on the segments and reshape them by clicking and dragging. Holding down the shift key while dragging activates the constraint. It doesn't matter what direction the handles are facing or how long or short they are. Holding down the shift key forces them to align straight with their respective anchor points and limits their movement. We have one more constraint that behaves rather differently than the shift key constraint. To activate this constraint, just bring up the preferences and under the selection and anchor display section, turn this option on. Now let's click OK and try to reshape the segments one more time. Now as you can see that the handles are now constrained, and notice that they are moving only in the direction they are facing. This is due to the constraint we just activated. So that's pretty much it about the anchor point tool. Reshape tool does exactly what it sounds like. It has a very interesting way of reshaping the objects, and that's what makes it my one of the favorite reshaping tools. Alright, let's learn how to use it. So here we have a line segment with decent amount of anchor points. If I select a few anchor points with the direct selection tool and move them, it doesn't matter if I move them by this point or this point. Direct selection tool is gonna treat every anchor point as equal and move all of them as one single unit. But if we talk about the reshape tool considers the distance between the cursor and every anchor point in the selection and move them accordingly based on that distance. The point we drag from serves as a focal point. Notice how each anchor point is getting affected by the reshape tool based on how near or far it is from the cursor. One more thing to remember here. If you are dealing with an open path, the start and the end points are always going to remain fixed until you directly move them. During reshaping, multiple anchor points can be used as focal points. We just have to drag over the anchor points that we want to use as the focal points, and as soon as we do it, we will get them highlighted. Let's go ahead and move them. Now as you can see that all these points have been equally influenced by the reshape tool. They all are now being treated as one single unit or a group. Working with multiple selection sets is much easier with the reshape tool. Here we have 2 groups of anchor points as a selection. If we move the anchor points from this side, the anchor points on the other side are not gonna move with them. Reshape tool helps a lot when you have this type of arrangement to work with. To reshape an object, we don't specifically have to move the anchor points. we can just drag a segment and the Reshape tool will add an anchor point on that spot. Clicking will not affect the shape of the segment, but it's gonna add an anchor point to the segment.